Throughout human history, including war, famine, and even during good times, much of humanity has relied on wild edible food. We are told by scientists that there are roughly 400,000 species of plants on planet Earth, and nearly 300,000 of them are potentially edible. At least parts of those plants are edible, and yet we eat on average about 0.1% of the variety of foods. And so I'm going to teach you how to learn wild edible foods that may help you and your family if difficult times come in the future. Hey everybody, Chad Cruiser here with Health and Homestead. And the first thing I want to do is tell you how to save your life, in the sense of you could eat the wrong kind of food, something that you think is a certain kind of food, but it's really a look-alike, and you may lose your life. And so I want to start off with 5 things that Samuel Thayer, who is one of the top wild edible experts probably in the world, at least in North America, the 5 things he suggests doing when you're first learning a new wild edible. And the first thing is what he calls tentative identification, meaning, so you've learned from maybe a book or from a website or the internet or from an app what you believe a certain food is, so you tentatively identify it. You say, yep, I think that's it. And that's a great place to begin, but that's just kind of an overarching, well, I think this might be it, but then you move on to the second point. And that is, you want to look into a field guide, a book that will tell you basically 2 different things. It's going to show you pictures of that plant, and the best field guides are going to show you that plant in different stages of maturation or growth. And so you can see the plant when it's young. It looks very different than maybe when it's totally ripe and ready to harvest. But one of the key things is that you have to read the description, because some things may look very similar in a picture, but the description will tell you a discrepancy between the true and something that is simply a look-alike. But if you read what they have actually told you, they may say there will be tiny, tiny little hairs on the stem. If it has the hairs on the stem, it's safe to eat. If it doesn't on this particular plant, it will likely kill you, and very rapidly. And so the point in saying this is, do both of them. Make sure to look at the pictures and to read the identification. And number 3 is to cross-reference. That means to look at multiple different guidebooks, different sources, to make sure that you have identified your plant correctly. Some books could be off, but if you're looking at 2 or even better, 3 different books, you're going to get a better idea that you have the correct plant. And now there's also apps that can help you out with that. And number 4 is a specimen search. That means you go around and look at that plant that you think you've identified. Once you've clearly identified it, you find it over and over and over and over. And what that does is it begins to create within your mind, in your memory, a mental image that is being seared into your brain, so that when you see it, it is absolutely clear. Okay, this is the plant. You've seen it over and over and over, and it just makes it much clearer so that you're not going to make a mistake in the future. Now, the 5th thing that Samuel Thayer talks about is contradiction confidence. Now, what this is he says you want to get to the point, and I like this idea, you want to get to the point where you know this plant as well as you know a banana. So, for instance, let's say you're at the grocery store and you put some bananas down, and the grocer, he gives the example of they ring them up as maybe grapes, and you say, well, those aren't grapes, and they say, oh yes, that's a grape, and you say, no, that's a banana. I mean, you would never get confused between a banana and grapes, and you can get that way with wild edibles too. Even with some of the ones that have look-alikes that to most people would look almost identical, you can get to the point where it is so clear that you have no chance of ever getting sick or hurt, because you know exactly what the true plant that you're looking for is. And by the way, you don't need to know every plant on earth. You're never going to do that. You just need to know 100% that the plant that you're trying to eat is the one that is safe and healthy for you to eat. Now, before I show you some of the ways to identify them, Linda Runyon was a wild edible expert, and she taught some very important points on how to tell if something is poisonous. One of the things she said, if you believe you fully identified accurately a particular plant, take a little tiny piece of it, maybe break it open a little, and for the first day, open up and just rub a little bit on your gums and on the front of your teeth. And then don't do anything else with that plant for 24 hours, and don't do multiple in a day, because you'll never know if one of them gave you any trouble. Now, if you then start having maybe a burning sensation, or it has a bitter, not nice flavor, then avoid that plant. It probably either isn't good for you or you simply got the wrong identification. It's probably not good for you if you feel some kind of negative side effect to that. And then she suggests after waiting a day or two, then you can go back and you can take just a tiny, tiny portion of it and chew on it, chew on it, chew on it. And if it didn't give you any trouble the first time, then you can swallow it, just a tiny portion. Now, then you wait another day or two to see if you have any ill effects from that. If you have no ill effects and you are confident that you have identified the wild, healthy edible as accurate, if you're confident in that, then you haven't had any trouble with these first two things, then you can come back and actually try maybe a spoonful or two and stop there. And then after that, if there's no ill effects, you can go on and you can begin to consume this food. Should be healthy by this point because you've already tested it to make sure. Now I want to share with you some books and at least a great app that you could use to help you identify the plants that are out there. Now, one of the great things to have is a field guide. A field guide will have tons of different plants. It probably won't give you a ton of detail on how to actually produce those foods and eat them, but they might give you a little general overview, but they can help you in the field find what you're looking for. Peterson makes a guide, I have one, but some of the books that can really inspire you to get out there are these three books by someone named Samuel Thayer. Samuel Thayer is today's, I would call him the Euell Gibbons of today. Euell Gibbons was this incredible wild edible, the master of wild edibles for a number of years. And the reason he was is because he grew up in a family where his dad left his family. They were very, very poor. He had to find the food that he was looking for, just go and scavenge for food out in nature. And he took care of his family in part by doing that. And so he tells this story of going for a walk out in nature and finding within like a half hour, 45 minutes, an hour, like 60 different wild edible plants, because really they are all around us if you get to know them. But Samuel Thayer is the modern Euell Gibbons, and he has three different books out. One's called Incredible Wild Edibles, 36 Plants That Can Change Your Life. He also has one called Nature's Garden and a guide to identifying, harvesting, and preparing edible wild plants. And the other one is the Forager's Harvest, a guide to identifying, harvesting, and preparing wild edible plants. And the difference between these books and not all other wild plant books, but many of them, is they will show you not only the plant that you're looking for, but he will show you pictures of the look-alikes, the ones that mimic, that look very similar to the one that you want to eat, but that may end up poisoning you. And so having guides that actually show you that is extremely, extremely important. Just a couple days ago, I was on a walk and I saw something that I figured, I got a little closer and found out, sure enough, there's two wild, one of them's a wild edible and one of them is a deadly look-alike, and that is Queen Anne's lace or wild carrot. And I was walking along a trail and I saw something that looked similar, but immediately said, that right there looks like it is poison hemlock. And sure enough, went and investigated, and in fact, it was poison hemlock. And poison hemlock can look very much like the Queen Anne's lace, which is wild carrot. Wild carrot is totally safe to eat. You can eat plenty of it. But if you eat some of the hemlock, which its root can look similar, so you can look like you're eating a wild carrot, and it may kill you. I actually, in fact, have a friend, I'm going to have a video of him in the future, I plan to anyway, of he and his family, they were out gathering wild edibles because they were living a very simple lifestyle, and his daughters were out doing it as little children, and they didn't pay close enough attention. And as you may have heard, Queen Anne's lace, there's a saying so that you can differentiate wild carrot from the poisonous look-alike, and that is the queen has hairy legs. Because Queen Anne's lace, which is wild carrot, has little like hair growing on the stem of it, where you do not find that on poison hemlock. And my friend ate it, and he knew what he had to do because there is a remedy. And by the way, I'll do videos on this, on the research on it, and just testimonies of, or at least a testimony of someone whose life was spared. His life was spared because he knew that once he realized he had eaten poison hemlock, he went and took some charcoal. He consumed the charcoal, went to the hospital, and they said, we have had other patients come in, nobody survived poison hemlock, but he and his family survived because they had eaten charcoal. as a remedy, and it works fantastically well in probably most cases. And so, but I'll share with you research in a future video. But back to the point. So learning the lookalikes is very important, and you'll find those in Samuel Thayer's books. One of the things I love about his books, and I want to show you this here, that he has in this particular book, this is the one called Nature's Garden. He has a section on something you may not think is very exciting, but he has a section on the acorn. And you say, yeah, who cares, right? Acorns are kind of bitter and nasty. Who would ever want to eat them? Well, Native Americans would not eat them all of the time, but they would use them when there was difficult times with other food. Because typically you're going to find somewhere acorns. And what you can do is you can leach them through a process of using water. You can leach off the tannins that are bitter and nasty and will actually probably give you stomach trouble. You can get rid of those so that you can use this as either like a nut, or you can use it like a flour. And something simple like that could be a food that if you needed it, if times were very difficult, it would be a free source of food. And right here, I mean, this one is a white oak right next to me. I have oaks all around my property. My acreage is mainly oak trees. I have other trees also. But the point is, he has like 50 pages on showing you how to find and how to process acorns, and actually even how to cook with them, how to use them in a different way. And that's one of the things you'll find in his book that you won't find in many of the other books out there, is recipes, learning exactly how to use these things. And so I'm going to put a link down below in the description for the wild edible books by each of these authors that I'm going to be sharing with you. Now, another phenomenal wild edible book to begin with. I think this is one of the best to begin with, and this is Edible Wild Plants by John Callis, PhD. And this is the Wild Food Adventure series that I think only turned into one book. So I don't know that it really is a series, but Wild Foods from Dirt to Plate. So he also does what Samuel Thayer does. He's going to tell you how to cook with it. I mean, here he has recipes in the book and how to add these plants to your plate. But I think if I remember correctly, this one's only like maybe 16 different plants. Yeah, I think it's 12, 16 plants or something along those lines. And you think, well, that's not very many. But his point in this book, and he'll show you the regions of the country that these are found in. And the cool thing is these plants in this book are found almost everywhere in the United States, at least everywhere almost in North America. And much of them you can find around the world. And so this is a great place to start. Now, really, these are more things that you would add probably more like a salad rather than it would be something that you could fully survive off of. You're not going to survive off salad because there's just not enough calories there. Something like the acorn in difficult times could help you because there's plenty of calories there. But having a diversity of things like you'll find in this plant, this is absolutely incredible. The pictures are really second to none in this book. That's one of the things I appreciate about his book. And it shows you the pictures from when the seedling just emerges from the ground all the way up until it is fully ready to harvest, a mature plant. And seeing that process is very beneficial because right now it's spring for me and some of the wild edibles are ready, but others clearly are not. And so being able to see them in their progression of growth can be extremely beneficial. Now, another fun one that may be fun for children, this is a tiny little book. I mean, maybe 70 pages or whatever here, but it's called Eat the Trees. Linda Runyon, and she is an author. She has other books too. She's passed away now, but she wrote this book called Eat the Trees because her family was living maybe up in the Adirondacks or somewhere up in northern New York, upstate New York, and she had a root cellar, and it got so cold one year that all of her glass jars, the cans that she had been canning, froze and exploded in her root cellar. She was very poor and didn't have money to be able to go buy food. And so what she did is the thought came to her, and she believed it was from God, that eat the trees. And so she shares with you how to, and this is actually a great point because there are certain trees that you can eat from, things like pine tree and also birch and various trees that you can eat from really year-round. So if you're in really desperate straits, learning some of these very simple things, and these are so simple that, I mean, pretty much anybody can tell a pine tree. It's very simple. And so she's going to teach you some of the principles on how to actually harvest and eat these foods. This would be something, especially if you have kids, you probably enjoy looking at some of these. You may be even having some things you could do with the family just to make it truly enjoyable. Another great book. And this particular app is called picture this. So I have it right on my phone. It's ready at pretty much all times. I can just flip up and I can look at picture this. And so you may be going around and you may not be looking for a specific plant. You may just have looked at a plant and you think, I wonder what that is. Or you see some berries growing on it, or man, I wonder if that's edible. And so you can take this app and just simply take a picture of the plant that you're trying to identify. It's not 100%. You need to have the books to reference to make sure it gets it accurate, but it'll typically get you moving in the right direction. It's called Picture This. So you download the app in the App Store and you open it up, and it may say something like this, like you can do a free trial for 7 days and then $29.99 a year, and then hit continue. But up in the upper right hand corner it says cancel, and if you click on cancel, boom, it opens up and you get to use it for free. And it's worth the $30, but you just hit cancel and it works. And then it'll show you at the bottom of the screen, you'll have something that looks like a camera. So you click on that. And once you do that, you simply point it at the plant that you want to identify, because you may be wondering, what is this? Take a picture and let's see if it works. Boom, common purslane. And this is one of my favorite wild edibles. My wife cooks it. It tastes fantastic. So the point is, you just point it at it. Most of the time it will get it right, but not 100%. So you need some of the books to reference to make sure that you've got the right plant. And I know some of you are thinking, man, it's just not worth it. It's too dangerous. If you're willing to take the time, it can be extremely fulfilling. And just to give you an idea, the reason why I got into wild edibles is because we bought our land in the country, we bought our acreage, and the first season we were spending months sleeping in tents felling trees. And I love to grow food, but the first season I didn't have time to do that. The only thing I could do is walk around the property and I could see all these plants. I could see berries, I could see different things. And sure, certain things like maybe raspberries or blackberries, you know those. But there's other plants, you see some berries and you're like, man, I have no idea if that's healthy. And when you first do it, you don't know all the plants around you. It's like walking around, let's say you live in a neighborhood somewhere and you walk the neighborhood and you see the neighbors, and after seeing them a few times you wave, and after waving a few times, you walk by each other and you're like, hey, I'm Chad, and they say, hi, I'm John. And before you just recognized each other's faces. Before you didn't even recognize each other. Now you recognize each other's faces, and you finally got to the point where now you know each other on a first name basis. And once you do that, it's more intimate than it was before. And so now walking around the property, as I've learned many of the different plants out here, I've learned many of the different medicinal benefits, like witch hazel right here. This is witch hazel behind me. And then I got the oak tree right next to me that's edible. And so medicinal purpose here, edible purpose here. There's benefits all around me. And now, not only knowing them on a first name basis, knowing them personally to the point where you can have an intimate kind of, I'm not being strange here, but you have kind of a relationship. You see the nature around you, and it's much more intimate being in nature when you know the plants that are around you. And just to think about it, that God gave us, most of the things around us have edible portions on these plants, and it's just a special experience when you get to know them. And it's comforting to know that in difficult times, you could potentially help your family by knowing these things on a personal level. If you want to learn some more about wild edibles, check out my video here on one of the wild edibles that I've enjoyed. I've went out and searched and found on my property. You can check that out right here. If you like this video, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell notifications. God bless and have a fantastic day.